Hey everyone, welcome to another Deck Tech. Today we're going to be going over Simic Warp Control. Earlier today I probably released, or at least I hope I released, a deck tech called Teamer Warp Midrange. That is the 3-color version of this deck, and specifically Teamer, so red, blue, green. And now I'm going to show you how I am playing this deck in Simic colors. So I strongly recommend you watch that deck tech first, because I go into slightly more detail into how everything works, but I'm going to give you a quick recap here anyway in case you're simply interested in playing the Simic version and not the Teamer version. So again, even the Simic version of this deck is really fun to play. Slightly less complex in the sense that it's one less color we need to worry about, and for my simple little brain, that's perfect. At the end of the day, the core is basically the same, minus we're not playing red and 6. So in this case, we are playing 3 Jace the Mind Sculptor and 3 Tamiyo Collector of Tales. And of course, those are closely tied to to Time Warp. Oh boy, I guess this is going well so far. Alright, so Time Warp. We are playing 4 of Time Warps. And of course, it is the namesake of the deck. It is the center of the deck. What you want to be doing is playing a large amount of Time Warps in succession, and what you have at the end of the day is a winning deck, hopefully. So how does it work? So Tamiyo is really more the centerpiece here, and I need to put in more rotations or iterations with this deck, but I have a feeling I'm probably going to drop Jace down to 2 and bump Tamiyo up to 4, and I think that's really going to be the final formation I stick to, but we'll see how it goes. I haven't put in enough games yet to be definitive on that decision. So Tamiyo is really the all-star here. The static ability of, preventing you from discarding cards from your hand or sacrificing permanents, that's cool, but it's not why we're playing Tamiyo. Why we're really playing with Tamiyo is because of her +1 and her -3 ability. And using those 2 abilities, you can essentially set up a sequence where you have Time Warp ×2, sometimes ×3 in a row. So what you're doing is you're playing essentially 4 turns, 3 of them being extras, in a row. Essentially, that's basically game over for your opponent, because there are very few decks that can deal with a Tarmogoyf or a Euro slamming in, Tarmogoyf at a 5/6 or a 6/7, which again is relatively easy to get to with this deck, just like the Teamer version. Very few decks can survive that, and you can do that relatively easily. So again, the +1 ability, you name a card. In theory, you can name any card, and I've done that. Sometimes I name Tarmogoyf because I really need a Tarmogoyf, and I know that I'm about to draw it, or I name a Euro, or whatever. It could be anything, but usually you're naming Time Warp. Ideally, you hit it. So ideally, you name Time Warp, you mill 4 cards, and one of them, or maybe even more, are Time Warp. They go directly into your hand. Next turn, or maybe even that turn, depending on how much mana you have, and again, you could get quite a bit of mana because of Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl, you can cast Time Warp either that turn or the turn after, and now things get interesting, because depending on the amount of loyalty on Tamiyo, and it doesn't have to be that high, you can -3 twice and get 2 free extra turns. So that could be up to 3 extra turns in a row because of Tamiyo. Which is super powerful. And again, depending on where you are at in the game, whether you're midway through or near the end, your opponent will not be able to survive 3 turns in a row, essentially 4 because of the first turn, assuming you didn't cast Time Warp yet. 3 to 4 turns in a row of you just slamming in with even just 1 Tarmogoyf. No deck can survive it, assuming they don't have anything to block with, which many decks don't. And that's how you win the game. Unlike the Taking Turns deck, which takes forever, you get timed often because it's trying to take a trillion extra turns and dirtle around until it hits its 1 win con. You're not doing that here. All you're doing is trying to get a couple of extra turns, and you're going to win out the game. The beauty of this deck is that you don't have to cast Time Warp to be able to win. And so let's move on to, you have Jace the Mind Sculptor as well, which can help you win out games even without Time Warp, right? So let's move on to the threats. So again, just like in the Teamer version, these are very similar. All I've dropped here is ice-fang Coatl, and you'll understand more when I get to the permission package. The permission package in the Simic version of this deck is a lot more robust. as opposed to the Temur version. So I've cut ice-fang coatl because of that. And instead what we have left is 4 of Arbor Elves to be able to generate a lot more mana every turn, especially with Utopia Sprawl. And then you have your Tarmogoyfs, of course, that get to 5/6 pretty quickly. And you get your Euro Titan of Nature's Wraths. I've upped the count to 3 for the Simic version. Probably a number you could play around with. I might even increase that to 4, potentially, but I would have to see what I would be cutting. But again, Euro, very important part of this deck. And this is your threat package. Again, if you have 1 Tarmogoyf on the battlefield, sometimes 2, 1 Tarmogoyf and 1 Euro, whatever the combination is, if you're getting 2 free extra turns, that's 3 attack phases. Unless your opponent has a million blockers, you're winning the game. So keep that in mind. You don't need that many extra turns to win. The removal sucks in Simic. Please help me. I know it can't be this bad. I know that blue and green historically don't have the best creature removal. Most of the time, especially in blue, your removal is pretty much relegated to bouncing whatever it is, whether it's a permanent or a creature, and that is good enough if you can win on the next turn. So in a deck like this, I would say that Vapor Snag is actually not that bad. Because if all you need is 1 extra turn, like you need a saving grace essentially, or in this case a fog, to stop a big creature from attacking in so that you can get to your next turn and then just get your 2 Time Warp casts and win. Vapor Snag actually does a pretty good job here because it hits every creature. It's not limited to 3 toughness creatures like Lightning Bolt is. So you could hit basically any creature you want, bounce it back to the opponent's hand, and assuming they can't recast it, you're in the clear next turn to do what you got to do, cast your Time Warps, attack in, and win. Vapor Snag is also useful in instances where your opponent still has 1 extra blocker and you need to get rid of it so you have a clear path forward. So again, that's another instance where Vapor Snag comes in handy. So in some cases, Vapor Snag is actually better than Lightning Bolt when we're playing the Simic version. I know that's heresy. I wouldn't play Vapor Snag in a Temur build because I do have access to Lightning Bolt. But the fact is, we don't have access to Lightning Bolt in this build. So I think Vapor Snag actually does a pretty good job. And it means, at least in this Simic deck, we can be a bit more creative with removal. But let me know what you think. I think Vapor Snag is probably the best one to play in terms of mana efficiency and what it does, and being able to even lose 1 life on your opponent's side. So I think Vapor Snag is a good removal spell here. Alright, so the permission package. So I'm still playing Remand. I've bumped it down from 4 to 3. But now I'm playing 4 times Force of Negation, 3 times Force of Negation and 2 times Archmage's Charm. This Simic build is more of a control build, as you can see. So this is why I didn't call it a mid-range. I don't think Simic decks can really be mid-range anyway. They're either aggro or control, so or tempo. So this is what we are doing here. So Force of Negation is going to really shore up your control matchups and your combo matchups. It's going to help you win control counter wars, and it's going to make you feel more confident when you tap out. So if you tap out and you need an extra turn or whatever, your opponent's going to maybe remove your Arbor Elf or kill off one of your Planeswalkers. Force of Negation is going to help you out there. So really, really, really cool and important card. Archmage's Charm as well. It's just a counter spell, but it allows you to do other things as well. If you need to draw cards end of turn, drawing cards is really important. Stealing creatures as well might be relevant here if you want to steal a creature at the end of your opponent's turn to be able to have a clear path forward after for your Time Warp extra turns. Again, there's some utility here with Archmage's Charm. And Remand, again, Remand in theory could be replaced with Mana Leak potentially or something else. It really depends on if I need really like a definitive counter spell or if I don't care if a spell's just being bounced in my opponent's hand. Because again, if you're countering a spell and then next turn you Time Warp off, it doesn't really matter if you bounce it back to their hand or not. The point is they're not going to have a chance to cast it again. So I think Remand kind of works here. I'll know a bit more when I play more of the deck. I don't have enough repetition yet with this deck to know for sure. Moving on to the ramp, Utopia Sprawl, just like in the Temur version, we know what it's doing here. Really, really powerful here because it allows you to cast your spells a turn early, which make a big difference. When you have the whole Time Warp Tameo thing going, Utopia Sprawl allows you to cast multiple spells in a turn. So, sometimes you need to do a Time Warp and Escaping Euro at the same time. You can do it with Utopia Sprawl and Arbor Elf in conjunction, or just having a bunch of Utopia Sprawls attached to your forest. So, again, Utopia Sprawl, very important card. You need it in this deck. The lands, very, very similar to the Teamer version. The fetches, I believe, are carbon copy from the Teamer version. The only difference here is obviously we're running 1 shock, well, 2 times of Breeding Pool, and we're running Botanical Sanctum. Botanical Sanctum is really just more a hedge. I mean, I'm trying not to damage myself too much in terms of lands. The Botanical Sanctum can turn into a 3rd Breeding Pool if you really want to. I wouldn't change it to be any other land. It would just be your 3rd Breeding Pool, but I think Botanical Sanctum works fine in this deck. Your 4 Prismatic Vistas are really there because you're mostly fetching for basics here and not non-basics. So I think Prismatic Vista gives you a bit more flexibility. And of course, Misty Rainforest hits all your lands. Wooded Foothills just shoring up your green essentially to get more forests if you need to. And then I'm running 4 times Snow-Covered Islands and 3 times Snow-Covered Forests. So on land's pretty straightforward. And that's it for Simic Warp Control. What do you think? Let me know. I think both decks are super, super fun. I've put in some games so far just to make sure that, I'm not in over my head. And now I'm going full blast. So I'm going to be posting a couple of matches today and a bunch more matches next week. And then my recap will be next Friday as well. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's really, really fun. If you have any suggestions at all, please post them down in the comment section below. I would love to hear your suggestions because I'm in the early stage of the brewing phase. So please let me know. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe, hit the notification bell. It really, really, really does help. It's not just for numbers. And of course, I have a Twitter account. Follow me on Twitter. I keep it relatively, simple. I don't overtweet. I probably undertweet a bit. I'm working on it. But I also do some announcements there as well. And you get some behind the scenes from here, from some of the videos that I post. So yeah, follow me on Twitter as well. And have a good one. Thanks.